the main point about this is that the Green Party needs to seize the means of media production. Okay, the Green Party needs to seize the means of media production. That's what we're talking about here. All right, so I've not done anything like this for a while. I haven't really felt the need to. I haven't really felt like I had much to say on the political sphere, and I haven't really felt like I'm kind of the person to say it. I've kind of been vaguely silent since Abolish Landlords, which passed and was great. I don't know. It always feels a little bit weird to be me and to talk about politics, because I'm not a politician. I'm not a journalist. I don't have a degree in politics. I'm just a barista. I'm just a Green Party member, and I have been for about 10 years. And I have talked about politics inside the Green Party, and I've talked about politics on Twitter and, mouthed off in various places. That's kind of my main qualification, and, the main reason I'm here, really. But I've felt the need to make this video and to write the blog post that is attached, and you can go read that on my website. To kind of cohere and to kind of write, get everything down on the page, and to practice what I preach and make a video about it, because that's what this is about. The Green Party has moved incredibly far over the past 11 years since I first joined. It has. It's moved farther than I thought was possible in the time. I think it's good to go back over what has changed. Very obviously, we did really well in the 2024 general election. We quadrupled our parliamentary representation. We got all 4 of our target seats. I didn't think that we were going to get the rural 2 of them. I was proved wrong on that one. I'm sure I'll be proved wrong on other things in the future. But afterwards there was, and I kind of predicted this was going to happen, a lull in activity and in vibes about the party, because its leadership went into Parliament and they disappeared into the bowels of Westminster, and they went to go do what Caroline did, and they went to go do that, and that's what they went there to do, and if anyone inquired about this, they would have known that, and they would have known that is what they were going to go do. They were going to go be backbenchers, and they were going to go do the role of a backbench MP, because that's what Caroline did. And it made sense when there was just, one of them. It made sense to build the credibility of the Green Party, the credibility in the eyes of the kind of the Westminster establishment, that, we weren't crazy. But it wasn't going to get more MPs, and that's kind of the problem. And doing the same thing times 4 was not going to get more MPs, and it was not going to excite the membership of the Green Party, and it wasn't going to excite anyone else. And I think if we're to look at what happened after that, so after the 2024 general election, we then saw the full emergence of Zach Polansky, the deputy leader, into the role of leader. We saw the launch of his leadership campaign, which was kind of obvious to everyone apart from Adrian. Sorry, Adrian, but it's true. We saw the emergence of Zach. We saw the momentum behind it. Was it the momentum and the vibes behind Zach Polansky and his leadership campaign? And that's really what defined 2025 as far as the Green Party went. We had quite a long campaign, not due to the rules, but due to Zach launching early, partly because the expectation was that it was going to be a much harder fight, and it really wasn't, and the results showed that, the margin of victory was so massive, probably could have cut down a month of campaigning, but I'm glad he didn't. He went out there and he got the attention for the Green Party. It was probably the most covered democratic exercise that we've had, in terms of media attention, in terms of press attention. It brought in members, it brought in, tens of thousands of members just during the leadership campaign. So yeah, that really defined 2025, and I think, to be honest, I think if the Zach's leadership campaign did what I'm going to be kind of crass and refer to as kind of the broad, unorganized faction of Lucasites, the people who kind of worship and adore Caroline Lucas. It did what they never could, and that is to excite the base of the Green Party, the people who believe in the policies. It excited them. It excited them. It brought them out, and it turned them out to vote and to really get involved, and to, I don't know, to be, it brought them out to be excited publicly about the Green Party. But winning the leadership is only the first step. Autumn conference, I think, showed just how much the public image and the interest in the Green Party has changed, not just in terms of conference attendees, but also in terms of press attention. In conferences gone past, the ones that I've gone to with my cameras, kind of the person at the front taking photos, taking videos, it's basically been me and two guys doing like a pool clip, or one person doing something for the press association, or a photo library that they're there. Like 2025, that was a real difference. There were people at the front. I was fighting for space with a camera, with all these other people, fighting for space with a camera. That's a real change. There is interest. No, people don't want the pool clip anymore. They want their own. They want a package. They want their own photos. That's interest. And that's a change. That is a real tangible change in the public interest. In the media interest in the Green Party. And that was kind of clear because Zach spent basically the entire conference doing back-to-back interviews and not really engaging in the business of conference, which I wish he would do. I think that would be interesting, and I think that would be a story in its own right, but it's fair enough that he didn't. It's only gone further. The party membership has tripled in the span of a year. That means activists, that means money, that means a larger pool of candidates, that means officers for local parties and volunteers in the way that we haven't really had before. Capacity issues have been something which have always plagued the Green Party, and it means more resources. All of that means more resources to fight elections. And roll around 2025, and that's going, it's going swimmingly. We're gearing up for London, for Wales. The Scottish Greens are doing their own thing. They're separate from us, but whatever. We've got local elections in lots of metropolitan boroughs up and down the country. We've got some cancelled elections that were then uncancelled, blah, blah, blah. But then a by-election comes around in Gorton and Denton. And in the update to the party's political strategy in 2025, the party committed to be by-election ready to win strategically important parliamentary by-elections. And I think it's done that a lot sooner than we thought it would. I think we've proven that it's capable of winning a by-election, with the National Party and two local parties, Thameside and Manchester. The party's proven that it's capable of successfully winning a parliamentary by-election. Not just a council by-election, not just a council election, a parliamentary by-election. From a standing start, from almost no data. There were like canvassing data there, but not a lot. And achieving a 27% increase in the vote. Beating Labour into third place, beating Reform. It's a monumental achievement, and shout out to the campaign manager, Miles Thorpe, who's a lovely, experienced, highly organised guy. That's kind of what you want in essentially the political version of a knife fight. You want someone like Miles on your side. But for all of this change and for all of this success, some things have stayed the same, and for all the talk about Zach changing the Green Party, it does, from the inside, it does feel in some ways thin. Like, a lot has not changed in the Green Party. And I think that it's good to look at what hasn't and what could. So like for years I've talked about internally inside the Green Party the need to take digital communications, to take social media seriously, to really invest in our capacity to shape the political conversation, to stop complaining about not being on Question Time, stop complaining about it, stop whining about it, and start to do things interestingly, to build our own audiences and our own platforms. I wrote a piece in Bright Green, which is a green aligned, kind of media site. It's a bit quiet at the moment, about 6 years ago. And in that time, one thing has changed, and that is what the leaders are saying. There were kind of two main strands, and one is what the politicians are doing, and one is what is the party doing. And on the first one, that's changed completely. Zach has taken that lesson on board. He has taken that, he has taken that thought on board, and he's run with it. He's not afraid to be criticized. He's not afraid to be attacked. He will say things how he sees it. He's prepared to make mistakes and move on, because realistically we all make mistakes and move on. He is prepared to defend our radical policies. He's prepared to go out there and fight for the Green Party, and to fight, to go at the opposition, to go at Labour just as they go at us. It's not nicely. It's not boring but sensible, because that doesn't excite anyone. He's prepared to go out there and excite people and get them energized. And that's great. On the other hand, the party side, the party infrastructure, the party structures side, the infrastructure behind the communications apparatus of the Green Party has not changed. Not radically, not much. We went into 2025 with one social media person, and we left with two. Okay, we left with two social media people and two community engagement officers, whatever that is. The pure lack of investment by the Green Party in social media, when our voter base is so young and so online, it needs to be studied. And honestly, the people responsible need to be called out. Molly Scott Cato, honestly, what were you doing? What were you doing? It's insane. Like the party has produced, following on from Zach's leadership campaign, where he produced a number of very high quality, cinematic, emotive, cut through pieces of content, in concert with, in collaboration with Jeremy Clancy, who is great. I love him. Like the guy knows what he's doing. The party's kind of gone with that a bit, produced 4 high quality party political broadcasts. They've gone out on broadcast, they've gone out on social media. But it has been, almost 6 months since Zach's got elected. And we got 4 pieces of content. They're beautifully shot, they're emotive, they connect with people. People really like it. But the frequency just isn't there. The frequency isn't there. The diversity in the content that the party is producing just is not there. The narrative, the long-term narrative content is not there. I can't follow what the MPs are doing by going to the Green Party social media page, because the content isn't there. What are they doing? What are their priorities? Why aren't they telling me that? The Green Party, it has a message which connects with the public on inequality, on stopping a genocide, in Gaza, all of this stuff on the climate, on inequality, on wealth taxes, that all connects with the public. Our public services, bringing them back into public ownership, taxing the billionaire class, bringing up living standards, bringing down the cost of living. It all connects with the public. Okay, and we've got messengers which can take that message, to the public. You connect with the public in an authentic way. What we don't have is the infrastructure to get the message out on our own platforms. We are entirely reliant on other people, on the media, on volunteers, on local parties getting volunteers and getting them to make content, which we then, which is then clipped up, which we then, accept collaborations with. The party itself, the Green Party, does not have the infrastructure to get that content, to produce it, to make it, to publish it. But let's be honest, the mainstream media, it is fickle. And world events and politics and the political narrative, it's not always in our control. If we want to communicate a message over the cost of living with the effective frequency that we are told we need in local election campaigns and and is definitely needed in social media, if we want to communicate that, we need the ability to pump that out day in, day out. For instance, if the Americans and Israelis start a war with Iran, how do we turn that into a message over the cost of living and in a message of inequality? It's difficult. How do we get that message out if we don't have the ability, and we don't have the ability to put that out on our platforms? If we don't have the audience on our platforms, it's difficult. It's difficult. You could turn around and try and make it about the rise in the cost of living due to the Strait of Hormuz being closed and the rise in oil and gas prices. Okay, that may connect with some people, but it is a difficult ask. Okay, and to be honest, having endlessly, and the only thing being brought out is endless clips of media interviews and media podcasts and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't connect with people. This connects with people. Talking to camera, talking to your audience in a normal setting, in a normal fashion, that is what connects with people. And it also relies, the current strategy, it relies on being consistently invited onto the news media, and we can't guarantee that. We've made it much more likely by being, second in the polls now. We've made that much more likely, but it's not guaranteed. And we are not always guaranteed to get a fair hearing. I think it's good to look at the aftermath of the by-election. I'll be quite honest, I've seen more of Matt Goodwin in the media and Reform in the media and Labour in the media than I've seen Hannah Spencer, the person who won the by-election. It's understandable that it has been framed almost entirely around Keir Starmer's position and Labour's loss of, a safe seat, should have been a slam dunk, Andy Burnham versus Keir Starmer, blah, 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 blah. But let's be honest, Hannah Spencer and the Green Party won that seat. If you're not talking to the people who won that seat, what are you doing? And this is where we need our own platforms. We need our own way to get our message out there and to talk to people about what won us that seat, about what we can do in other seats, why you should get involved, why you should donate money. That's what should have been coming out of the Green Party. And instead it's clips of news media or it's clips of interviews. Hannah's gone to Parliament now, and very smartly she has produced she's produced one day one vlog of going into Parliament. I do wonder whether that will continue and whether the party will give her the support to continue that, because it got great engagement. It's quite clear that Zach himself has thought about this and has taken, this idea on board about the need to have our own platforms, to have new platforms, to have platforms we control. Because after becoming leader, he created his own podcast where he can talk to people about the issues that he wants to talk about. He can talk to people in a fashion that he decides. He can publish what he wants on his platform, which is his podcast, which has got great engagement, it's got great reach, it's got great listenership. Okay? And look, This is what the party needs to recognise. Okay, Zach will not always be the leader of the Green Party. He is constitutionally term limited as leader. That's not me saying I want him to go. I don't, but he will go. Okay, and that's good for him and it's good for us. It means we move on, and it means he moves on, and he's not forced to be there the entire time. That we are forced to produce new leadership talent. But it does mean that the focus will not be on him. It will be on someone else. And do we rely on every single person in the Green Party building up their own platform, every Green Party MP building up their own personal platform? Well, what's the point of being in a party? We might as well just be independents. The party itself needs to use our money that we give it, okay, to collectivize that, to collectivize a platform together, to build that. Because, look, what we've currently seen over the Gorton and Denton by-election in the aftermath is a massive criticism of our drugs policy. A drugs policy I agree with, okay, but it is a nuanced message. It is a message that has not really gone out there before, and it is a message that, to be honest, even with all the rebuttals, no one has, sat down and had a conversation about the drugs policy. Okay, what the Green Party should have done is produced videos that investigate this, to investigate, bring in the drugs policy working group, okay, ask them about the policy, get them to explain it, get them to, bring out the research and the graphs and all that kind of stuff, to talk about it, to talk about their experiences with drugs, to talk about why you shouldn't be scared of this policy of legalizing and regulating drugs. That's what we should have been doing. Okay, that is long form content that people are going to engage with, and I think people want to see it. People want to see, a political party out there defending its policies and out there explaining them in, before the election, before the manifesto. Why are you going to do this? And it could have been a great exercise, but we simply don't, there is not the capacity for that, because we don't have the equipment, we don't have the staff capable of using cameras and going out there with the capacity to go make that. They don't have the remit. Like we're currently in administration on a dozen or so councils up and down the country. We're currently in administration in one of what's called the core cities. It's a big city, Bristol. What is happening on those councils? I don't know, to be honest. I know what my friends tell me up and down the country. Those councils are subject to the pressures of austerity. Where is the content coming out of those councils explaining that, look, we don't want to have to do this. Here is what we want to do. Here is what the government is going to force us to do, like Zohran Mamdani has done. Where is that content coming out from? Because you can't rely on those councillors to just, to try and kind of just do it on the hoof. They don't have the support. They're doing a difficult job, which is running a city, which is running a town, a district council. It's a difficult job. Okay, so the Green Party needs to get with it and to provide that support, to provide that national comm strategy, to really tie it together, to put in the collective effort. And yeah, I think we should build a Green Party media ecosystem, controlled by the party. We currently have 5 MPs. We have one question in Prime Minister's Question every 11-ish weeks. That's basically 5 a year. And then perhaps one Green MP off in a newsroom somewhere. So you've got at least 3. I would use those 3 to react to, to do a live stream, to react to what is going on in Prime Minister's Questions. They're not sitting in the room. There's not enough space for them. Okay? They could be used for a better use, which is telling the public how they would answer those questions, what questions they would answer. Take apart the question itself, okay? Go through it, talk about the news of the day. You've got, you've got the time, you've got the space. You don't have to be in every single parliamentary debate. You can be out there making content which goes and shifts the conversation, which goes and educates the public about what you, the Green Party, thinks about these things, thinks about political issues, thinks about the news of the day, and how you would do things differently. I would have a videographer assigned to follow Zach Polanski and actually do things properly Zohran style and not whatever we're currently doing. We should build a studio in the parliamentary office or in the Green Party HQ. Build a studio, host some talks, host a podcast, like do something like that, host a live stream, every day. And I want to see like a vlog of what the MPs are doing, not just one of them, but all of them. Like, what are their priorities over this parliament? What do they want to achieve? What are the stories that that drive them? Let's follow a piece of legislation. Let's follow a private member's bill. Let's follow, I don't know, a bill committee and what they're doing. Use that content to activate people, to get them to turn out to a rally, to try and force Labour to climb down on like rent controls or proportional representation or something like that. Really use social media to influence people, because that's what it's there to do. And every piece of content should have a call to action, to signpost to activities. Where do we want our activists? Do we want them at a rally? Do we want them at a Target campaign? Do we want them to come and, take some action to lobby their MPs? Do we want them to donate? Yes, we want them to donate, because this will be an expensive endeavour, but it will have a payoff, both financial and also politically. It will have a payoff, in that we will be able to produce content that will go out there, that will go to a mass audience, that will go out and hit social media and will change the conversation, and the media will follow it. They will follow that. And I think we need to think about, why would we build this media ecosystem? And I think to do that, we need to look much farther ahead than the next election. Okay? We need to think about what we're going to do after the election. Okay, too often Greens think about, in the party, we think about what are we going to do to get to the election, and not what are we going to do afterwards. We know why, we've got the policies, we know why we're here, why we're doing this in order to change it. But what we don't think about is how we're going to play it after the election. The assumption is that, the MPs will do that. The MPs will think about that. No, the party needs to think about this. We need to think about this, because it determines who we should be sending to Parliament. And I think, look, it is entirely possible, given the polling numbers, given the levels of support and money and all that kind of stuff, that we could be seeing Greens in a minority party in coalition. I'd hope that we don't go into coalition, because we don't know the first thing about running the government. We should be aiming for confidence and supply. What we should be aiming for is, Labour being a minority government and us getting concessions out of them, getting proportional representation, rent controls, things which, affect the cost of living and affect the constitution of the country, so that we don't have to go through first past the post elections anymore. But look, it is entirely possible that the MPs, when they're elected, disagree with me. It's entirely probable, and that they enter a minority, enter into coalition government as a minority partner, and they will get the shit thrown at them. They will get absolutely everything thrown at them, and they will not have a media that is on side. The mainstream media, the right-wing media, they are not on side. There will be an absolute onslaught on the Green Party the moment that we enter any kind of government at all. And so we need the infrastructure, we need the ability to fight back on that, we need the media infrastructure to fight back on that. We need to be able to explain what is going on in government, explain what our ministers are doing and our MPs are doing, explain the policies, and and to kind of to have the debate and to have the interrogation of those policies in the public sphere. To be able to talk about people, if for instance we're in a coalition government, we have to compromise on something that we promised in the manifesto, or that we said that we wanted to get in the manifesto, and we have to compromise on that to get something else, we need to be able to tell people why that happened. Tell people why we think that that's a good idea, and why that, that compromise was necessary, because compromises are necessary in coalition. Their compromises are necessary in politics generally. And I think that we need to do it as a party, to have this collectivized effort, partly because individuals come and go, but the party remains, the party stays the same. The party is there. If we have what we have now, which is a party comprised of individuals with individual platforms, with individual influence, then we will never really truly come together. We will never truly be as one when it comes to our politicians. So yeah, I think we need a collective platform. To do this, we have to hire videographers, we have to hire editors, we have to hire graphic designers, motion graphic designers. We need a professional team. We have to buy kit. The party needs to own kit necessary to produce all of this content. We need a shelf of FX3s. Producing party content, having a consistent style, having an editorial style, all of this kind of stuff. I want to see like a Green Party LUT put out. Hiring freelancers is fine for singular projects like a party political broadcast, but different videographers have different kit, they have different styles, they have different looks, they have different creative influences. What hiring freelancers doesn't do is give you consistency. It does not give you consistency over a platform. Okay, that is why you need to hire staff. You need to hire videographers, full-time staff videographers, in order to produce all of this stuff. And we need an executive and a comms team that really understands that and really gets behind that as a vision. Look, there will be some people who watch this video, who read the blog post and go, that's not our job. That's the media's job. You're talking about creating a media company. You're talking about this, and what I want to say to that is that I think that is hopelessly naive. If you think that there is going to be a media that is going to fight our corner, then you are naive. I'm sorry, but the mainstream media is not it does not support us. Even when they say that they support our policies, they don't support us. They don't trust us to make it, to trust us to build that vision. Even the smaller left-wing media outfits, they don't have the size and the reach, in order to influence the public conversation. And to be honest, a lot of them aren't, they're not affiliated to us. Their support for us should not be taken as a given. And that's good. That's good that the media is not. But look, we need the party needs the ability to communicate on its own terms. And look, I think we need to recognise, over this parliament certainly, we need to recognise the parliamentary arithmetic. Okay, we have 5 MPs. We are not going to be able to force government climb downs like we saw during the Brexit eras, the 2017 to 2019 era of politics. We're not going to be able to do that with such a small amount of MPs. We need the ability to rile up the public in order to do that. We need the ability to turn people out on the streets, to make the government lose elections in order to turn them around, in order to turn the narrative. And that requires being able to talk to the public, to have our MPs, to have our leaders and our spokespeople to talk to the public. And I think there needs to be a recognition that our MPs are not backbenchers. They should not be backbenchers. We don't need our 5 MPs in every Westminster Hall debate, in every Commons debate, following every bill. We don't need them doing that. There are 650 MPs out there. Okay. We need our MPs talking to the public, talking to the party, getting up the base, exciting the base, talking to the public and, talking to them about what we would do differently, about our policies and what we would do differently. Fundamentally, we need influencer MPs, not backbench MPs. I think the main point about this is that the Green Party needs to seize the means of media production. Okay, the Green Party needs to seize the means of media production. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, so a call to action. I talked about the need for Green Party comms to have a call to action in every video, and I'm going to take my own advice. I'm going to, I made this video, partly because I need to start taking my own advice on things. So a call to action. Here is the first one. And that is to vote in the annual ballot, to take part in that process, that internal democratic process. Okay, this will only come from a Green Party executive that actually understands and cares about this issue, that understands and cares about the politics of it and the need for the infrastructure of the party to change, the need to invest in the infrastructure of the party. Okay, that's only going to come if you vote for people that actually understand and want to do it. that have an eye for this kind of thing, that understand what is necessary to produce this kind of content. That will come at the annual ballot, which will be later this year, during the mid-year. So look, you need to lobby GPEX and the CEO of the party to get this stuff done, to get this investment happening. When the annual ballot comes around, you need to ask the candidates what their thoughts are. Do they think it is fine as the way it is, and why? What do they think needs to change? What investment are they planning to do? We have a terrible internal debating culture, and we desperately need a better one. We need the spaces to actually have these arguments out, kind of in the view of members, in the public view, to actually have this debate and talk about what is needed to change. But look, demanding the change is the first step. The second call to action is to get building a platform if you can. I bear some weight of hypocrisy on this. Okay, I have the tools to produce videos like this, and I don't. I'll be honest, a fair amount of that is, who am I to talk about politics on the internet? I know in the rational part of my brain that you don't need a qualification to talk about politics on the internet, but sometimes it does feel like you do, because I'm a barista and I don't have a degree in any of this kind of stuff. I just have the experience of being a member of the Green Party for so long, and participating in campaigns, and talking to people who participate in campaigns, and thinking about it a lot, and talking about it a lot inside the Green Party. And now I'm talking to you. I know in the real world that political commentary doesn't require qualifications, but yeah. So I've been reticent to talk about this kind of stuff on this YouTube channel. Then I may do it more. If you want me to do it more, do tell me. So yeah, if you enjoyed what you've heard here, if you've watched it all the way to the end, congratulations. If you want to hear more from me on the Green Party and on green politics, and kind of the politics of the Green Party, other left-wing ideas and stuff, do tell me. I am interested in making more videos like this, kind of longer form stuff, discussions about the Green Party generally. It's my autistic special interest. If you agreed with what you heard here, do tell me, because that's nice. If you think I'm wrong, tell me that too. If you want to chuck me some money, feel free to do that. There'll be a link below. Do read the full blog post, because it probably makes more sense. And yeah, good to have you here. And I'll talk to you all later. Ta-ra.